ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Monrovia, 7 o'clock in Lagos. Good evening and welcome to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. Here are the top stories. The Nigerian government, FBI and Interpol investigate 800 million cryptocurrency fraud. Ghanaian President Mahama launches 1 million coders program to transform the country's digital economy.
The 1 million coders program is not just a fulfilled campaign promise. It is a strategic pillar of our Reset Ghana agenda, designed to empower Ghanaians with digital skills critical for 21st century life and work.
Benin's National Electoral Commission unveils calendar for the 2026 general elections, and U.S. jury convicts Michael Correa, a former Gambian soldier, on 6 counts of torture.
I feel like this is just the beginning. I'm humbled, grateful that he was able to at least be found guilty of something.
One of the crimes that he was charged of was conspiracy to commit torture. And it was very clear, even on the audio that was played as an exit, conspiring to attend the torture of other victims.
Details of these stories and more are coming up shortly.
Here is Augustine Coley with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners across the sub-region and beyond. This edition begins in Nigeria, where the federal government is investigating a cryptocurrency fraud which led to a colossal losses estimated at $800 million. The cryptocurrency exchange, also known as CBEX, went offline on Monday, April 14, leaving thousands of investors bankrupt. Nigeria's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, is working closely with international organizations such as Interpol and the FBI to identify those responsible for the fraud. Francis Boniface has the details.
According to statements from the Nigerian Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, the investigation into crypto activities had begun before the platform's collapse. EFCC spokesperson Dele Oyewale stated that the collaboration with Interpol and the FBI aims to recover the embezzled funds and bring back the culprits to justice. Initial investigations suggest that the platform was operated by a complex network involving both foreign nationals and Nigerians. Nigerian authorities also noted that CBEX frequently changed its domain name, a tactic used to evade regulatory oversight. The EFCC spokesperson said the issues began on Wednesday, April 9, when the platform inexplicably suspended withdrawals. Subsequently, CBEX demanded additional deposits from users under the pretense of account verification. Finally, on April 14, the platform vanished overnight, leaving thousands of investors in despair, as the victims' anger even resulted in acts of vandalism at the company's fiscal offices in Ibadan, southwest Nigeria. This scandal comes shortly after the enactment of a law in 2025 that establishes a legal framework for cryptocurrencies in Nigeria, making any trading activity without prior authorization illegal.
Francis Boniface with that report. A U.S. court has found former Gambian soldier Michael Correa guilty on all 6 charges of torture and conspiracy to commit torture in a landmark ruling. Correa, a former member of the Junglers, was also found guilty by jurors at the week-long trial in Denver on Tuesday of participating in a plot to torture suspected opponents of the rule of former President Yahya Jammeh 20 years ago. Witnesses who testified against Correa produced audio recordings and photos. Several rights defenders and activists at the courthouse expressed their satisfaction with the decision and complimented the process. as Kanwi's managing editor, Yusuf Taylor, discussed the trial's verdict with the relatives of the victims.
I feel like this is just the beginning. I'm humbled, grateful that he was able to at least be found guilty of something, even though if it was not for the murder of my brother, because we 100% believe he was a factor, or he was a contributing factor to the murder of my brother. I believe that this is just the beginning.
When they were reading the charges that he was guilty of, I I was counting my fingers to be sure that he would be guilty of all the charges that were put forward. And thankfully he was, because evidences are very clear to show that he was the one who committed these crimes. And obviously, one of the crimes that he was charged of was conspiracy to commit torture. And it was very clear, even on the audio that was played as an exhibit.
Yes, his own voice.
His own voice confirming to torture, confirming to attempted torture of other victims. And he had also confirmed that he was a jungler.
Everybody throughout this case, one of the important things that they've been highlighting, because this is happening in America. We've seen what happened in Switzerland and we saw what happened in Germany. Yeah. You've made reference to them, Bailo, Usman Sonko. What's your message to the Gambia government?
My message to the Gambian government is to really work hand in hand with the victims to ensure they support them. Victims need to be preserved because a lot of victims are dying, in a sense that those that are going through serious medical complications, and we need these victims to testify in cases like this. So for the Gambian government also, the political will as well should be there to ensure that these crimes are prosecuted, in a sense that ensuring that we have all the capacities in place, because to be quite honest, it does not happen overnight.
Askanwi's managing editor Yusuf Taylor discussing the trial's verdict with relatives of the victims. Korea faces up to 20 years for each of the 6 counts he was convicted of. Crossing over to the Central Sahel region, nearly 100 political parties met in Bamako, the Malian capital, on Tuesday to express their firm opposition to consultations aimed at reviewing the party charter. Announced last week by the transitional authorities, these consultations are scheduled to begin today, Wednesday, in the regions before the national phase. Skeptical about the initiative, the political actors question whether the ultimate goal will be the outright dissolution of the political parties. Sankule Janko explains more.
Guarded within the Initiative of Political Parties for the Charter, IPAC, these political actors initially indicated they would not participate in these consultations. Speaking at the conference, Umar Ibrahima Toure, a member of IPAC, believes that this desire of the transitional authorities has hidden agendas. It is worth noting that Mali adopted a multi-party system as far back as 1991. Key figures in the struggle that led to the advent of this era reaffirmed that they have no intention of backing down and will fight to preserve the survival of political parties. A charge reiterated by Alassane Abba, Secretary General of the Convergence for the Development of Mali, CODEM. While Mali has nearly 300 political parties, new parties continue to emerge. The development, Yusuf Jawara, president of the Yelema party, says he does not understand. Those who addressed the press also indicated that they had unsuccessfully requested an audience with the transitional Prime Minister, General Abdoulaye Maiga, to discuss the postponement of the announced consultations.
Sankule Janko with the details of that report by our Bamako correspondent Aliou Cham. Still in the Sahel, the Burkinabe capital Ouagadougou is hosting the third meeting of the chiefs of staff of the armed forces of the AES member countries. The meeting, which began on Tuesday, will, among others, discuss the pooling of forces in the fight against terrorism and the operationalization of the joint force. The Burkina Faso meeting follows those previously held in Bamako and Niamey last year. Abdoulaye Hassan has the details in this report.
After Bamako and Niamey, senior military officers from Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger are meeting in Ouagadougou. The meeting is considered strategic for these 3 countries fighting against insurgents. It will provide an opportunity to discuss the pooling of forces against armed groups, according to the Chief of Staff of the Burkinabe Armed Forces, General Moussa Diallo.
In a context marked by a persistent terrorist threat from terrorist groups with their external support, it is up to us to build together a coordinated, sovereign and resolute response. This meeting constitutes, in this regard, a crucial step in the implementation of our shared vision of collective security based on solidarity, the interoperability of our forces and mutual trust.
Specifically, the Ouagadougou meeting will allow for the validation of a roadmap, the additional defense and security protocol, and the establishment of the AES Joint Force, which is expected to number 5,000 troops. General Umar Jara is Chief of the General Staff of the Malian Armed Forces, FAMA.
The political guidelines are very clear. We are military personnel, so it's at our level that we must work tirelessly to make this force a reality. It's already a reality on the ground because we operate together, whether in the air, on land, or in the other areas. Intelligence skids allowed us to successfully conduct many military operations on the ground.
These military leaders are convinced of the ability of this joint force to defeat terrorism in the Sahel. For them, the most important thing is to avoid dependence on external aid for defense and security.
A report by Martin Kaba in Ouagadougou, voiced by Abdullahi Hassan.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now, in Ghana, President John Dramani Mahama has positioned the country at the forefront of Africa's digital transformation with the launch of the 1 Million Coders program. The initiative seeks to train 1 million Ghanaians in essential coding and digital skills, targeting youth and underrepresented communities as part of a broader effort to expand opportunity and foster inclusive growth. At a ceremony held this Wednesday, President Mahama described the program as both visionary and practical, setting the groundwork for long-term economic change. Here is an extract of President Mahama's speech.
The 1 Million Coders program is not just a fulfilled campaign promise. It is a strategic pillar of our Reset Ghana agenda, designed to empower Ghanaians with digital skills critical for 21st century life and work. It is an intentional move towards building a knowledge-based, innovation-driven economy, one where our greatest resource, our people, are equipped to create solutions, generate jobs, and be able to compete globally. The 1 Million Coders program will train 1 million Ghanaians in essential digital skills, from coding and cybersecurity to data analytics and networking. These are not just technical abilities, they are economic passports, pathways to decent jobs, entrepreneurship, and long-term social economic inclusion. We do not walk this path alone. Across the globe, nations that recognize the power of coding early have positioned themselves for extraordinary progress. Let us consider what this means for our country. First, job creation and economic growth. Ghana has the potential to be Africa's premier business processing outsourcing hub.
Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama. Meanwhile, Amnesty International is urging the Ghanaian government to shut down witch camps in the northern region where more than 500 women live after being accused of witchcraft activity. A new report by the rights watchdog further reveals the deplorable living conditions of the affected people. From Accra, Nadia Tete completes the story.
They are called witches, not by law, but by communities that see them as a cause of misfortunes. And once accused, women, mostly elderly, are forced to flee their homes and live in isolated camps across the northern part of Ghana. Many are attacked, rejected by their communities, and forced to live in poor conditions without enough food, clean water, or medical care. More than 500 of them live in these camps, according to Amnesty International's latest report titled Branded for Life. Speaking during the presentation of the report, Amnesty's country director for Ghana, Genevieve Patenting, urged the government to immediately close all the witch camps.
We call on the government of Ghana to look into a gradual closure and reintegration of women from the alleged witch camps back into their communities or elsewhere they feel safe. These camps are not a permanent refuge. They are a symbol of societal neglect.
The organization is renewing its call for the passage of the reintroduced anti-witchcraft bill, which could criminalize witchcraft accusations and related issues.
We cannot allow this injustice to continue. The government has a duty, both moral and constitutional, to act decisively. That is why today we make clear and urgent call for legislative action to protect elderly women from these baseless accusations and the violence that often follows.
Though Parliament passed the bill in July 2023, it did not receive presidential assent under the Eswal administration, leaving hundreds of women still vulnerable. The rights watchdog is demanding swift government action, a national awareness campaign, and sustainable support for reintegrating affected women. For WADR, Nadidi Teti, Accra.
You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. The Nigerian government, FBI, and Interpol investigate 800 million cryptocurrency fraud. Ghanaian President Mahama launches 1 million coders program to transform the country's digital economy. Still ahead in the news, Benin's National Electoral Commission unveils calendar for the 2026 general elections, and the Lancet reveals a gap in global efforts to achieve Sustainable Development Goals number 2 and 3. We also have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Many thanks for sticking with us. We are streaming live on YouTube at WADR News and on Facebook, WADR English Service. The government of Guinea has launched a biometric census operation to cover the entire national territory. The 45-day exercise would enable the state to generate a safer registration register and a unique identifier for citizens. According to the Minister of Territorial Administration, General Ibrahim Ankari Konde, data from the operation will support the establishment of an electoral register. This civil registration exercise is a prelude to the constitutional referendum of September 21, 2025. And in a related development, Benin's National Autonomous Electoral Commission on Tuesday unveiled the 2026 general elections calendar. President of the Electoral Commission, Saka Lafia, revealed the timetable at a ceremony attended by political parties, state institutions, relevant ministries, the media, and civil society in Cotonou, the nation's capital. Here is Saka Lafia speaking.
Both documents are concise and focused on key dates, taking into account the start and end of each activity. They are essentially dynamic, and their implementation will take into account both internal and external constraints. They represent important internal planning tools for political parties, alongside those they have established to enable them to organize and prepare for upcoming elections.
Saka Lafia is the president of the Autonomous Electoral Commission in Benin. Away from Benin, the Lancet Commission, a universal health research body, has called on world leaders to critically harmonize the understanding of gender in order to achieve health equity. The Commission's April 2025 report reveals that globally, the world is not close to achieving Sustainable Development Goals 3 and 5 on health, well-being, and gender equality, respectively. Christopher Aticho, in this report, tells us more.
The report, titled Achieving Gender Justice for Global Health Equity, reveals that realizing gender justice in universal health remains a challenge, as countries do not have disaggregated data on gender issues in order to tailor specific interventions to reduce the gap and enhance global health coverage, as issues of gender-based discrimination and exclusion persist. At the center of this troubling development is the non-clarity of the term gender. El-Haj Al-Hussein is the co-chair of the Gender and Health Committee.
Health is not only, the absence, of disease or infirmity, but health, as it is defined, is a complete state of well-being. And if we do so, we realize, that things like gender are quite central to it, because it determines, the power structure within societies. It determines also, the levels of risk and vulnerabilities that we face.
On her part, the co-chair and co-CEO of the Global Health 50/50, Professor Sarah Hawkes, called for effective collaboration among actors of the SDGs Goal 3 and 5 in order to achieve sustainable development.
So we're not on track to meet the health goals, but whether we're on track to meet the health goals for men and women is not clear because often health data are not disaggregated by sex. So, I can't tell you who's worse off, men or women, because countries often don't provide that data. Once you've got the disaggregated data, then you can start to see where you need to intervene to actually reduce the gap. But right now, what we see is a complete disjuncture between SDG 3 and SDG 5, which is the gender goal.
The Lancet Commission report recommended 3 key things, thus an international legal definition of gender, the establishment of a hosting platform for data collection, as well as a new mechanism to finance gender justice.
Christopher Teacher Fight that report.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is a guest.
Our guest this evening is Gafudu Sapor, Benin's journalist and political analyst. He joins us from Cotonou, where the Electoral Commission has unveiled the 2026 general elections calendar. Why the unveiling is seen as a step in the right direction, concerns such as the revision of the electoral roll and new electoral codes remain major concerns for the opposition in the country. Here is Sapor speaking.
Well, there hasn't been any major reactions, especially from the political actors. There hasn't been much reaction. I think it's a good thing. The goal is to help all the stakeholders have a better follow-up of what will happen and how it's going to happen. Now, the major issues remain as far as political parties are concerned, which I think the Electoral Commission is not entitled to address, but we haven't really, so far, we haven't, maybe in the next few hours, we have more reactions from political parties.
But again, you talked about one major issue. That would be the review or revision of the electoral roll. That is one major issue that the opposition in Benin is calling for. Yeah,
I mean, we have the electoral roll that is, I think is underway, but still the issue related to the electoral codes, which is still like a major issue for most of political parties because some parties may not be able to be part of the election if ever they don't have the required number of supporters in terms of mayors and also in terms of MPs, especially for the opposition. It's a very, very tricky issue.
The electoral calendar has been unveiled. Do you think overall, at least by end of the year, that the political climate in Benin is going to heat up, and how do you foresee some of the changes occurring?
It's true that the electoral code is saying that you cannot unveil your candidate 6 months before the election. You have to wait until 6 months before the dates that have been known before you unveil your candidates to the elections. And so far, I think everyone is trying to abide by that. And any attempt to nominate or call somebody's name is forbidden. And even those who tried found themselves in jail. So because the new law does not allow you to, even from the government side, you cannot really show any particular support that does not come from the choice, because the rule is the parties that must really make the choice of their candidates. You, as individual, cannot really support the candidacy of an individual, a person that was not chosen by the party. And parties cannot really unveil their candidates until June or July this year. So we hope, it is our wish that there is no major problems, it does not heat up. But I think that everyone is just careful and pray for the best. Otherwise, the way things are right now, there are more chances that the situation heats up is very high.
Do you see CSOs mobilizing ahead of the 2026 general elections just so that there is a free, transparent and inclusive elections, and not just that, also that peace is maintained before, during and post-election period?
A few days ago, there was the Catholic Church that organized a kind of conference along with the CSO, and they even invited the biggest political party And they raised some concerns that they want to see addressed by the government and also by the institution in charge of organizing elections. But one thing is sure is that CSOs are not that much free to speak as they used to.
Gafudu Sapo is a Benin's journalist and political analyst. Right now, Sankule Janko joins me in studio with the latest in the sporting world. Good evening, Sankule, and welcome. What's the latest sports news right now?
Good evening, Augustine. Of course, the latest will begin with the CAF under 17 Africa Cup of Nations because there were some surprise results, I must admit. I mean, of course, Burkina Faso were my favorite, but unfortunately they're out because the finalists for the CAF under 17 Africa Cup of Nations have been confirmed after Tuesday evening results. In a thrilling encounter marked by tactical discipline and missed chances, Morocco edged Cote d'Ivoire 4-3 on penalties after a goalless 90 minutes of regulation time. Both sides, of course, crafted several promising opportunities, yet ultimately let down by poor finishing, leaving deadlock intact until the decider. Host eventually Morocco won on penalties 4-3. Meanwhile, Mali booked their place in the final of the CAF under 17 Africa Cup of Nations with a commanding 2-0 win over Burkina Faso. Surprise results there on Tuesday evening in Casablanca. A goal in each half was enough to send the Young Eagles through to Saturday's championship match where they will take on, of course, the host Morocco.
Yeah, but now, interestingly, let's focus on Europe. There's some interesting encounters coming up tonight from the UEFA Champions League qualifiers.
Absolutely, Augustine, because in the UEFA Champions League, Barcelona, of course, secured qualification, yesterday. I mean, after, despite losing to Borussia Dortmund on Tuesday, Aston Villa also beat Paris Saint-Germain 3-2 at home, but it was not enough as the Parisians qualified to the semi-finals. Tonight, though, Augustine, tonight all eyes will be on Real Madrid taking on Arsenal, hoping to turn around the 3-goal deficit that is Real Madrid in Santiago Bernabeu, and their fans are making a lot of comments that they are the deal, that they will beat Real Arsenal, they will turn the tie. Well, in the next news edition we'll inform our listeners how that pans out. But Inter Milan will also hope to replicate their first leg performance because they beat Bayern Munich inside Allianz Arena 2-1, and then now they are playing at home. Hopefully it will just be a matter of getting a draw, and then that's it. You are in the
looking at the efforts by Borussia Dortmund and that of Aston Villa. Coming back, although they won at their respective home, but in terms of today's game, what can we make of coming back?
I think for me, the interesting thing about this UEFA Champions League quarterfinal stage is I think the ties were more or less over in the first leg. Because for Aston Villa, they considered last minute against Paris Saint-Germain. That's why even yesterday, even though they won, it was not enough. And the same thing applies to Barcelona against Dortmund. Barcelona were 4-0 winners against Dortmund. Dortmund did very well yesterday, but it was also not enough because the tie was all over. So today, too, for so many people, for neutrals, the game is over because Arsenal won, but Real Madrid 3-0. But it's Real Madrid, you can never write them off.
Okay.
And for Inter Milan, knowing that they are playing at home and knowing the history of Italian clubs, it looks like they'll also be true.
Thank you, Sankule Janko. We keep following. That's how we wrap up this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and a special thanks to Mam Kodun Jai Fai and Umu Danyogo for the technical support. Connect with us on our social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR English, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. I am Augustine Cully. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Baf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango.